All right, guys. So today we're going to be checking out the MOONDROP Illustrious IEMs. Now, this is basically a semi-flagship IEM because these are not cheap. These are the successors to the Illumination series, which MOONDROP has released in the past. Now, these do come in retailing at $899. So I would kind of consider these more of a luxury item. This isn't going to be something that's going to appeal to most consumers that are looking to spend $100, maybe $200 on a pair of IEMs. But once it gets up to this price point, this is where I find that it's more geared towards audiophiles. This is where things are tuned a little bit differently, or they're focused on one thing more than they are the other, or trying to give you more of a reference sound. So we're going to see how these are being approached. As far as the build, they are made from a titanium alloy. They also have a brass gold-plated acoustic structure. Now this part you can see, right before the nozzle, and the acoustic structure that's in here is made to kind of dampen the treble a little bit, try to smooth it out so it doesn't sound as bright or as harsh. So we'll talk about that once we get to the sound. Now it is using a 11mm dynamic driver that has a diamond coated dome composite diaphragm. This kind of cuts down on distortion, but it also keeps things sounding a lot more accurate and not as loose as a lot more of the consumer grade style IEMs. Now the body of these overall is very small. It is a very comfortable IEM. I never had any kind of issues with these moving around or feeling like they were going to just pop out of my ears. The cable that it comes with is very thin. Now it is the braided cable. It is using the 2-pin connection, which again, I kind of find that to be the most common connection on IEMs. So you probably have some of these lying around already. And then the connection that goes into whatever device you're using, it has 2 different adapters. So you can use a normal 3.5mm just headphone jack, or it has the 4.4mm balanced plug-in. Now I like to use this because I feel like I'm getting the better sound quality this way, but I like that you get both options out of the box. Now, as far as anything else that comes in the box, it does come with a nice looking leather case. It's a hard case to kind of keep not only the IEMs in, but also your ear tips and the different adapters as far as the plugins go. The ear tips that you get, you are getting 12 different sets. So there's 4 different styles that they've included. 3 of these are different silicone ear tips. And this will affect the sound quality. There's some that are a little bit more loose. It gives you a little bit more of the low end. There's some that are a lot more firm, which tightens everything up a little bit. And then they also include foam ear tips as well. So you have plenty to choose from right out of the box. If you prefer foam ear tips, it's nice that you have that option. But I like to be able to switch between the different silicone ear tips because that's what I prefer. And I actually like the black version they have here. It's a little bit more loose. I feel like it gives me a little bit more bump in the low end. But that just kind of comes down to personal preference. Now, as far as using these plugged into an amp, or if that's a requirement, I will say, if you just plug straight into a device without any kind of amp or any kind of DAC, you get plenty of volume out of these. That's not an issue because the impedance level on these is 25 ohms with a sensitivity level of up to 124 decibels. So it's really easy to drive these. But if you're going to spend $900 on a pair of IEMs, you really want to get the most out of them anyway. I just recommend using an amp. That honestly is going to be the best way to get the most out of the lows, the mids, and the highs, because just plugging straight into a device, you're trying to rely too much on a device itself that's not really meant to amplify a pair of IEMs like these. But again, it's not really a requirement if you're just looking for decent volume. So now let's get into the sound. The overall sound quality of these are surprisingly smooth. There's nothing harsh about these. There's nothing overly done. There's nothing like overly boosted, but it doesn't mean that any of these things lack at all. It just kind of depends on what you're familiar with. So if you're familiar with bass being boosted as much as it can to have that subwoofer type feel, that's not what these are. If you're used to treble being bumped up to where it, gets right up to the point of being harsh or overly bright, that's not what these are either. And mids do not sound colored. They don't sound like they're doing anything to take away from the way that it was recorded. But what they are doing overall is giving you a really nice tight punch in the low end. I did notice with the black ear tips, it does seem a little bit looser than the other ear tips, which again, this is what I prefer. I like to have that punch and have it kind of sit around just a little bit. Again, this has more of a natural approach. Same thing with the mids. Nothing feels like it's being elevated or pushed in your face, but it definitely never feels like the vocalists are getting lost in the mix. They're never getting buried. And if you're listening to a genre where there's a lot going on, it just never sounded congested or muddy. And the same thing with the treble. Treble has a lot of detail to it without getting harsh, which again, I wouldn't mind if the treble was a little bit brighter. That's just, again, personal preference. I feel like things sound a lot cleaner when it's this way. And I would say again that these have an overall really smooth sound to them. It really is taking that natural approach. They are really fun, but it is closer to being more of a reference style IEM. Just again, slightly elevated and not completely flat. Now the soundstage and the sound imaging on these, I was really impressed with how open they sounded, because obviously this isn't an open back pair of headphones. It's not going to sound like you're in this huge concert hall, but it does have plenty of space with everything. And again, I think that's because it's not doing anything to muddy up the sound or close it in any kind of way. So they do sound really open. And honestly, I never had any issue with being able to tell where different sounds are coming from it. So my overall opinion is this. Again, I said this at the beginning of the video that I do consider this to be more of a luxury item or more geared towards audiophiles. So if you're just a normal consumer, I don't think this is going to be an IEM that you would be looking at anyway. But from a sound standpoint and from the way that these are tuned and how clean they are and how loud you can get them without there being any kind of distortion and how nicely they, evolve or change with whatever EQ settings that you have, I think they're really, really impressive. But the market right now is very, very competitive. And as nice as these are and as incredible as they sound, because I do feel like they sound amazing, there's some really good ones out there for $300 and $200 that, it just kind of comes down to your personal preference. I don't think people that are spending this kind of money, the ones that are used to spending this kind of money, is going to feel like they don't get their money's worth. I do feel like it is impressive for what it is, but it is using, again, just a single dynamic driver. I have gotten to where I'm used to multiple drivers, and I like electrostatic drivers, and I like planar magnetic drivers. I think there's just so many different options out there that I like that there's, just a nice option like this, a more higher end option using a dynamic driver. But for me personally, I think if you're spending that kind of money, you want to be blown away by it. And as much as I love the sound of these, it wasn't something that I immediately said, I don't need to use any of the other products that I already have. But don't let that take away from what your personal preference is. Sound obviously is subjective, and it's going to come down to what you like anyway. But guys, that's my video and kind of a first look at the MOONDROP Illustrious. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Thank you so much for checking out all the other videos. And as always, make sure to stay tuned for more.